Well, warm greetings to all of you gathered together, and big thanks to the folk at Strake Christian Media for the privilege that you've given me to share this devotion. A phrase that I've been hearing a lot recently, and maybe it's a phrase that even some of you have used, or your friends or colleagues, is the phrase, I'm feeling just so overwhelmed at the moment. I don't know if it's a phrase that you have used, but it's a phrase we use when we, when we're not coping, when things are getting on top of us, when we have come, as it were, to the end of our own resources. And I think one of the questions that we ask in moments of overwhelming is, the question, how do we live well and wisely and faithfully amid our overwhelming experiences? And it's against this backdrop that I want us for a few moments just to look at the story, the well-known story of Noah. It's a very dramatic story. Children love it. It's a very powerful story that has shaped the Jewish imagination particularly. It's a very complex story, particularly in terms of how it was written and its origins. It's a very patriarchal story. It struck me the other day that not one woman in that story is given a name. But it's also a very human story, and I want to approach it as a human story. It's a story I want to suggest of overwhelming. So what I want to do is I want us for a few moments to keep one foot in the story of Noah, and the other foot in the story of our own lives. And perhaps as we do that, perhaps God may just have a word for you and for me today. I want you to notice, just first of all, that the flood for Noah is an overwhelming experience. And it's an overwhelming experience at two levels. It's a cosmic overwhelming. The flood affects the whole world, and it's also a very personal overwhelming. It affects Noah and his family. There's a sense in which we've come through a very, very difficult time historically. Think of COVID. It's been an overwhelming experience at both those levels. At a cosmic level, it's shaken the whole world, and yet it's also been a very personal experience. COVID has affected each one of us. Our own lives have been overwhelmed in so many different ways: shattered dreams, loss, grief, separation from loved ones, and the list just goes on and on and on. I think one of the most important things, and I offer this to you, say this to myself as well, that one of the most important things we can do, I think, when we're feeling overwhelmed is just to name it. To find a safe place, conversational space with someone that we can really trust, and name the experience of overwhelming that we may be in. Biblically, naming something is a very, very powerful act. I want you to notice, secondly, that Noah is able to survive the experience of overwhelming. He's able to survive the experience of the flood because he follows God's details to build an ark. You can read about it in chapter 6 of Genesis. The instruction comes very clearly to him. Build, make yourself an ark. And then after that, some very, very, very careful details. And I've been wondering, what it may mean for you and me to build an ark in the midst of our overwhelming experiences. I think one thing that happens when we are overwhelmed is that very often an experience of overwhelming knocks our lives out of shape. And I want to suggest that to build ourselves an ark is to give shape to our lives. I never forget, right at the beginning of COVID, I did a podcast with someone overseas, and they asked me, we're going into this time of pandemic, what are your intentions? And it was then that the story of Noah came into my own mind, and I said to this person, I'm going to build myself an ark. I want to give shape to my life. And even though the pandemic knocked my life totally out of shape in so many respects, as it knocked your life out of shape as well, I found it so important just to have an ark. That there were some things that would happen every day. I would go for a run at 6 o'clock in the morning. I would have coffee afterwards. I would have about 20 minutes of silence and quiet. I would seek to do whatever I was doing that day as creatively as possible. At every day at 6 o'clock, I would light a candle, have supper with Debbie. And Debbie's the woman I'm married to. And these very simple things, these very simple details kind of gave my life a shape when everything else was being knocked out of shape. I wonder what it may mean for you to give shape to your life, to build yourself an ark. Because I think it's an ark that keeps us alive when our lives are overwhelmed. But there's one last thing that I would invite you just to notice in the Noah story, and that is that God gives to Noah, do you remember that very beautiful sign, the sign of the rainbow, as a sign of God's faithful covenantal love? A covenant is a very big word, and the word makes its first appearance in the Bible, as you know, in the story of Noah. Now, most covenants, as you also know, are two-way. You enter into a marriage covenant, both partners make vows to each other. But significantly, the covenant that God enters into Noah is one way. It's a covenant that God makes with you and with me and with this whole world. And in effect, at the beginning, God wants to give up on creation and wants to give up on the creation project. But in the end, God's grace, mercy, faithfulness, love comes through in this covenant. And we know that the God of Noah is the same God who came to us in Jesus Christ. God says to us in Jesus Christ, I'm committed to you. There's nothing that you can ever do that will stop me loving you. Nothing. And I want to hold you safe, as it were, in my great love for you. So I don't know what you're going through at the moment. I really don't. But I want you to know that God is committed to you. God is committed to your well-being, to your flourishing. God longs to share your life with you. And I hope that in your own way, you may respond to the gift of God's faithful, covenantal love. One of my, you may know I'm a Methodist, so I'm going to wave the Methodist flag for 20 seconds. One of my favorite Methodist hymns, written by someone who was blind, who went through a broken engagement. He wrote these words, "O love that wilt not let me go, I rest my weary soul in thee. I give thee back the life I owe, that in thine ocean depths its flow may richer, fuller be." And then that beautiful line, I trace the rainbow. I trace the rainbow through the rain, and believe the promise that morn shall tearless be. So thank you for letting me share with you, and I just pray that what I've shared may mean something for you today.